So go back to 2020. We had been living in that house that we were in for 5 years, almost 5 years. Another management company took over. And when they took over, a couple of literally 2 or 3 months later is when COVID hit the United States. It hit the United States bad. From that point, my husband's job shut down. He's a truck driver. They shut down because, everything was happening. Everything was new and fresh. And so people were pretty much told not to come into work and all of that stuff. So therefore, of course, funds got low. The amount of savings that we had saved up while we were still in that house until the new company fully took over, we had to use, which they still required us to pay rent. Even though we were, getting ready to leave, but the money that we had saved literally still had to pay the bills because of the fact that my husband's job was affected by 2020. So fast forward, when it's time for us to actually leave that house, even during 2020, for them to do renovations to this house because they took over the company, we had to immediately find somewhere for me and my family to go. We went to this company that we did not really want to go to because we had worked with that company before and we knew that they were slumlords. And if you guys know what slumlords are, it's not good to go in business with them. It's not good to rent from them. But in 2020, based on the situation that was happening, this was the only company that would take us at that time with everything going on. So we ended up having to get another house through the old company that we had been a part of. Not the new company that took over, the old company. We had to end up getting a house still under the old company. Because, of course, like I said, the new company took over. So, over the house that we were in. So, we ended up sticking with this company. Get into this house. This house, when you go to slumlord type companies, they don't ever do any upgrades. They don't ever actually clean the houses after, before moving someone else in. They pretty much just give it to you as is. And because you've fallen on hard times, you really don't have a choice but to, no matter whether or not the lease terms and all of that stuff you agree with, because the situation, it's a hard situation. So therefore you go ahead and sign. You end up being there. Then they raise the rent tremendously to the amount that you cannot afford to pay anymore. Therefore, we had to leave that home last year. Left that home last year, didn't get evicted. We ended up leaving the home because our lease was up and we could not afford the rent anymore. That's the reason why we didn't stick with the company, because we could no longer afford the rent because they had raised it up so high. Which put us in a situation to where my family and I were living in a hotel. Living in a hotel until pretty much someone that was a part of our congregation welcomed us into their home. And me and my kids, my family, into their home and let us stay there for 6 weeks. 6 weeks for us to basically try to, get on our feet, which is genuinely not enough time to get on our feet. And therefore having to move back with my parents until we can get back on our feet to be able to leave. So just a series of unfortunate situations that have happened. You go from one place being stable, paying rent on time for literally almost 5 years, to another company taking over the house, you having to be forced to go back to an old company because of everything that was going on in 2020, having to be forced to go back with that other company. Then once you're there with them, that other company, for a while, they raise the rent so high to where you cannot afford it anymore. And then having to live in a hotel and be on the street. And finally having to come back to my mother's house. And if you guys watch any of my content, I kicked and screamed and yelled not to have to come back here. I literally did not want to come back here because I knew it would open up wounds that right now, being in a really bad situation, I didn't need those wounds to be reopened back up again. So now my family and I are deciding to leave Georgia. We don't have a home. to go to. But we're deciding to leave leave Georgia, and we're going to Florida. So what's in Florida? Nothing. But I feel like that's where maybe we can have a fresh start. A fresh start as far as our family is concerned, and finally being able to give my children what they deserve, which is a home. Because having to hear, "Mommy, I want to go home," but not knowing where home is, and having to continue to hear that because of a trickling effect of situations that have happened, is very raw in regards to emotion, of how you feel of not being able to provide your children with anything. And in the midst of not being able to provide your children with anything, still being beat down. Like, everybody falls on hard times. Everybody does. There's not a single person in this world who has never fallen on hard times. But to have to come back home and be beat down for falling on hard times, knowing exactly what the situations have been, unfortunate situations, and to make you feel worse about those situations. Like, when someone is down at their lowest, you don't beat them down more. Family is not supposed to do that. And yes, they've allowed us to stay in their home for the last couple of months, but it has been hell. So we're just going to go to Florida, and at this point, whatever happens, happens.